I want to describe a couple to you, and I want you to tell me whether they sound familiar. She works in marketing and earns $62,000 a year. He works in information technology and earns $71,000. Together they bring in $133,000. On paper, they are doing very well in many data sets. That puts them in the top quarter of American households. A person looking only at their tax return would assume they are comfortable. He would assume they are saving seriously. He would assume retirement accounts are growing. Vacations are taken without guilt. Emergencies are handled without drama, and the house runs on calm. But that is not what their life feels like. Their life feels narrow. They are tired. Their savings are thinner than outsiders would expect when the car needs repair. The answer is sometimes still a credit card. When one of them gets sick, the whole household tightens. When a work problem appears, it does not feel like a work problem. It feels like a threat to the mortgage, the school district, the childcare arrangement, the second car the next month, the structure of the whole life. That is the part outsiders do not see. And yet these people did exactly what modern America told them to do. They got the degrees, they got the jobs, they married, they combined their finances, they bought the house in the decent district. They kept going. They did not behave like fools. So why does a household making more than $100,000 still feel as though it is one awkward month away from trouble? I have spent a lifetime thinking about capital allocation, margins of safety, and the difference between what looks prosperous and what actually is prosperous. This is one of the most misunderstood subjects in the entire middle-class financial life, because the issue is not simply that prices went up, or that wages disappointed, or that modern life is expensive. All of that is true. The deeper issue is that the structure of the middle-class household changed in a way that looked like progress, sounded like progress, and often behaved like a trap. That trap is what I want to explain, and I want to explain it without politics, without slogans, and without the lazy habit of blaming the people standing inside it, because many of the people inside it are doing exactly what they were taught to do. That is what makes the trap so effective. A bad financial habit is easy to criticize. A socially approved financial habit that quietly weakens a household is much more dangerous. The cleanest way to describe it is this: two incomes did not simply increase household strength. In many cases, two incomes became the new minimum requirement for buying what one income used to buy. That difference matters enormously because once the emergency engine becomes the default engine, the household loses the backup plan it did not realize it was using. Most people do not think of it this way. They think in arithmetic, one income plus a second income should equal greater safety. That sounds obvious. It also sounds obvious that if one man can carry 50 pounds, then two men can carry 100. That is true so long as the weight of the object stays the same, but that is not what happened to the American household. The object got heavier, far heavier, housing got heavier, healthcare got heavier, childcare got heavier, education got heavier. The fixed cost of standing still in the middle class got heavier. And as the second income entered the system, the market did not politely let families keep the first standard of living plus a large surplus. The market repriced around the new dual income norm. That is where the trouble began. I want to take you back for a moment because financial traps often become obvious only when you compare systems across time. In 1970, a typical middle-class family usually had one primary breadwinner. Very often that was the husband. Very often the wife was at home or working far less consistently for wages. This was not a better world in every moral respect. I am not romanticizing everything about it, but if we are speaking only about household financial design, there was one enormous hidden strength in that arrangement. The second adult's earning capacity was often untapped. That meant it existed as latent resilience. If the main breadwinner got sick, lost a job, or suffered a setback, the household had a margin it could activate. Not a pleasant margin, not the first choice, but a real backup plan. At the same time, the fixed cost structure of ordinary middle-class life was meaningfully lower relative to income. A median home cost a smaller share of the household's earnings. Public schools in many areas did not require the same housing. Bid escalation that later became normal. Healthcare was cheaper. Childcare as a line item often did not exist because one parent was available to do that work. The system had more breathing room in it. Now, I do not want sentimental nonsense here. Single-income households had vulnerabilities too. They had dependence risk, they had less individual flexibility for women, they had different social trade-offs and limitations. I understand that perfectly well. But in strict financial structure terms, many had something modern dual-income households often lack slack. They had a backup engine today. In most married households with children, both adults work. This is treated as normal, progressive, expected, and in many cases necessary. But a very important thing happened when this became normal. The backup engine got turned on full time. Once both incomes became the default way to carry the household, there was no second reserve income left waiting in the wings. The emergency card was already being played every month just to keep the machine running. That is a profoundly important shift, because a family with two incomes fully committed is not twice as safe as a family with one income and one reserve earner. In many ways, it is less safe. It is carrying more speed with less room to absorb a shock. This is what the public keeps misunderstanding. They see two salaries and imagine padding. Often there is no padding. There is simply a larger structure built to consume both salaries. And because the structure is larger, the vulnerability can become greater, not smaller. The source material you gave me points to the work Elizabeth Warren did decades ago on this question, especially the idea that dual-income households became more financially fragile rather than less. I think the reason that finding still surprises people is that they are looking at the incomes and not the commitments. The commitments tell the truth. Fay Felicite Fay turn 100 file 0 Fay. Let us make that truth more concrete. Suppose one spouse earns $70,000 and the other earns $50,000 on paper. That sounds like $120,000, a strong combined income. Now stop thinking like a tax return and start thinking like a household. The second income is not the gross number. The second income is what survives after the system takes its cut and after the household pays the cost required to make that second job possible. Taxes come first. The marginal dollars earned by the second worker often stack on top of the first worker's income. That means they may be taxed more heavily than a standalone income would be. Then if there are children, childcare enters. That is not optional. That is the price of the second paycheck. Then there is commuting, gas, maintenance, parking. In many households, a second vehicle entirely. Then there is the silent expense almost nobody likes naming, because it sounds unserious until you total it. Exhaustion spending, prepared food, more takeout, more convenience services, more delivery, more things purchased because nobody has the time or energy left to perform the labor that one person at home might once have absorbed. All of that is real. It does not vanish because it is not glamorous. And by the time you run the full arithmetic, honestly, the $50,000 second income may not be producing anything close to $50,000 of net household strength. In some cases, after child care and the rest, it produces shockingly little. That is why households can make what looks like serious money and still feel thin. They are not necessarily failing. They are operating inside a structure that eats gross income very efficiently. Now add the most important expense of all, housing. This is where the trap closes hardest. A two-income household can qualify for a larger mortgage. The bank sees the salaries, stacks them together, and says, yes, that is how banks think. They do not ask the philosophical question that matters most. What happens if one income disappears? They ask a narrower question. Can these people service this debt under current conditions with both incomes present? That is how loans get approved. And because many households are approved for houses priced on two-income capacity, the whole housing market begins repricing around that capacity. This is the part few people say plainly enough. The second income did not merely help families buy more house. The second income became part of the reason houses cost more. If every household in a good school district can bid with two incomes, then prices will no longer reflect one income purchasing power. They will rise toward two-income purchasing power. This is especially true in suburban districts where school quality, safety, status, and housing price all get tied together. Then the family tells itself a very normal sentence. We are not buying too much house, we are buying for the kids. That sentence has destroyed more long-term margin than many investors lose in bear markets. I say that as a man who understands the emotional logic. Children are involved. The neighborhood feels important, the school looks decisive, the house itself looks like stability. All of that is emotionally real financially, however. Something else may be happening. The family may be exchanging flexibility for educational optionality, and it may be doing so at a rate much more expensive than it realizes. Now, the monthly fixed nut is built for both incomes. The property tax is built for both incomes. The insurance is built for both incomes. The maintenance is built for both incomes. The transportation network around the house is built for both incomes. And once you build a life that requires both incomes every month, you have not merely enlarged consumption. You have reduced your room to maneuver. That is what I care about more than almost anything in personal finance room. To maneuver margin, the space between what the household earns and what the household must keep earning in order not to be frightened. Most people think financial security is mainly about income. It is not, it is about margin. A person earning $130,000 with almost every dollar spoken for can feel more fragile than a person earning $90,000 with a durable savings rate, modest fixed costs, and a real reserve. Because the first person has no room, and life punishes people who have no room. One transmission failure becomes a balance transfer. One medical issue becomes a debt event. One layoff becomes a mortgage crisis. One family emergency becomes a retirement contribution skipped again, then silently abandoned. That is how the two-income trap does its damage. Not through one giant collapse, through constant structural fragility. And this fragility does not only hit the bank account, it hits the household mind. A household with no slack begins thinking differently. It becomes more anxious. It becomes more reactive. Job dissatisfaction cannot be acted on because the mortgage is waiting. Burnout cannot be honored because the childcare structure is waiting. An aging parent needing help becomes not only a family issue but an economic threat. A child with special needs changes not only the schedule but the solvency map. Everything intensifies because there is no reserve engine left. That is why I say the issue is not income, it is optionality. The single most important thing money can buy is not consumption. It is options. The option to walk away from bad work. The option to reduce hours for a season. The option to care for a parent or a child without destroying the architecture. The option to move. The option to breathe. A two-income household that has used both incomes to build the lifestyle baseline has often purchased more visible comfort while selling away those options. From the outside it looks richer, from the inside it is often more brittle. This is why I think the most important frame for modern dual-income households is not bigger income. Better life. The better frame is this. How much of our life can one income carry? That question changes everything. It does not mean one spouse must quit working. It does not mean modern families should imitate 1970 as an ideology. It means the household should stop treating both incomes as equally committed to permanent fixed obligations if it wants to preserve real resilience. That is the heart of what I would call a one-income foundation. Not necessarily one income living in a literal sense, one income survivability in a structural sense. Let me explain. Suppose a family has two incomes and does not want to give up either one. Fine, I am not arguing with the preference, but if the household is wise, it will still build its fixed cost base as though one income matters more than the other. Housing size below maximum qualification. Transportation kept sane. School choices weighed against long-term capital loss. Lifestyle not allowed to rise every time the second income rises. The second income then becomes strategic. Not ceremonial. It becomes the engine of reserves, retirement saving, debt elimination where appropriate taxable investing, and the future optionality of the household. That is a completely different use of the second income. And it changes the risk structure of the family more than most people realize. In one model, the second income is already spent before it arrives. In the other model, the second income is the thing building freedom. Those are not close cousins, they are different lives. This is why the best dual-income households I have seen do not look the richest from the street. They often look suspiciously ordinary. The house is good, not grand. The cars are fine, not theatrical. The vacations may be pleasant, not socially competitive. The school decision may be practical, not prestige-driven. But under the hood, the machine is strong. Emergency reserves are real. Retirement contributions are aggressive. Taxable assets are growing. the household could survive one income loss, maybe uncomfortably for a while, but survivably. That is the test, not whether the neighbors are impressed, whether the family can absorb reality without financial panic. Reality always arrives eventually. That is why I like stress-tested structures more than I like aspirational ones. Now let me say something delicate but necessary. A lot of people hear arguments like this and think the answer is simply for one spouse to stop working. That is not my point. Sometimes that is the right answer. Sometimes it is clearly the wrong answer. I am not prescribing one moral model of family life. I am prescribing one financial principle. Do not let the household become so addicted to two incomes that both incomes are required forever just to maintain the floor. That is the principle. Because once you do that, every shock becomes more dangerous and every choice becomes narrower. The real goal is not fewer working adults. The real goal is more household freedom. And that freedom is built by refusing to let every extra income dollar turn into a permanent obligation. That means the second income should have a mission, a serious mission. It should not disappear into the fog. It should not all quietly dissolve into restaurants, subscriptions, nicer cars, more expensive summer programs, upgraded furnishings, and the sort of lifestyle haze that makes households say we don't know where it all goes. I know where it goes. It goes into fixed costs disguised as rewards. That is the great leak. The second income should instead be pointed, almost brutally, at structural strength. Emergency fund first, because a household without liquidity is one inconvenience away from acting stupidly. Then retirement accounts, because years lost in the 40s and 30s are not ordinary years. They are prime compounding years, and the money denied those years is not easy to replace later. Then if those are healthy, taxable investing, because a household that wants optionality before traditional retirement age needs assets outside the locked box too, then where appropriate debt reduction on the truly dangerous debts. Not moral debt reduction for its own sake, but intelligent debt triage. The expensive debt first, the structurally bad debt first, the debt that reduces optionality first. This is how the second income can be transformed from an invisible leak into a visible engine. Once that engine has run for several years, something beautiful happens. The second income begins creating not only savings, but autonomy. The couple no longer feels as though both jobs must continue at all costs forever. One spouse may cut back, one may leave a toxic role, one may take a sabbatical, a parent can step out for a season if needed. A layoff becomes painful, not catastrophic. That difference is everything I want to return to the couple I described at the beginning, because I think many people listening are somewhere inside that couple. Perhaps not in the exact salary range, but in the structure: too good jobs, too little breathing room, too much tiredness, too much fragility for the level of income. The reason this feels so emotionally confusing is that the household is not poor in the ordinary sense. It is structurally overcommitted. That is a very different diagnosis, and different diagnoses require different solutions. If the problem were low income alone, the answer would be earn more. Sometimes earning more does help. I like earning more. But if every extra dollar merely gets eaten by the same structure, the answer is not only more income, the answer is redesign. The answer is refusing to let the whole system keep resetting upward. The answer is asking the question almost nobody asks soon enough. What part of our life is forcing both incomes to remain mandatory? Once you ask that, honestly, the trap becomes visible. Maybe it is the house. Maybe it is the cars. Maybe it is the school district. Maybe it is the social standard of what your life should look like. Now that both adults have careers, maybe it is all of them. Whatever the answer, the household now has something much more valuable than vague stress. It has a lever. And once you can see the lever, you can change the structure, perhaps not instantly, perhaps not painlessly, but structurally. That is what matters. I have always believed that wealth is not the ability to consume more. It is the ability to need less from next month than you once did. That is why a two-income family can look prosperous and still not be wealthy at all. If the whole machine depends on uninterrupted performance from both adults forever, then much of the apparent prosperity is simply borrowed confidence. Real prosperity contains resilience. It contains room, it contains backup, it contains the ability to absorb bad luck without the entire architecture trembling. The total income trap is not a condemnation of work, ambition, marriage, or progress. It is a warning about what happens when the second income becomes permanently committed before it ever becomes strategic. That is the trap, and it is everywhere. The way out is not shame, it is awareness, then design, then discipline. Build the floor low enough that one income could carry it if life turned. Use the second income to build assets. Not only appearances. Treat margin as a sacred thing, because margin is what turns income into security. Without margin, even good income can feel like a treadmill. With margin, even less dramatic income can become a platform. I would take the platform every time, because a platform can carry a life. A treadmill only carries a pace. And a great many dual income households today are not standing on platforms. They are running on treadmills, telling themselves the speed means progress while secretly wondering why they are so tired and still in the same place. That is not a personal failure. It is a structural one. Once you understand that, the whole problem starts making sense. And once it makes sense, you can stop blaming yourselves for not feeling safe on numbers that supposedly should make you safe. The numbers are not the whole story. The structure is the story always.